I'm Anna Pede. I'm a fourth-year PhD student in the Bren School, and I'm really excited with my talk about forest fires, environmental enforcement, evidence for removing in Amazon. So I don't have to say much to this audience that preserving the Amazon and implementing effective environmental policy there is really important. Home to incredible biodiversity. Shout out to Flora for taking that picture during our trip. She's not really good at catching piranhas, but she's an amazing birder and photographer. However, in addition to the beautiful nature photography that we did, unfortunately, I took this photo in 2022 of some land on fire that unfortunately was buried as usual by the end. We were there in September, which is peak fire season, and you could just feel that smokiness there, the very uncomfortable presence of fire smoke. And it was quite sad to see, I must say. But that year, unfortunately, was not an exception. For example, in 2023, almost 9 million hectares of the Brazilian Amazon burned. Just to give you an idea, that's roughly the size of Portugal, or if you're a soccer fan like I am, that's roughly 12 million fields of forest on fire in a single year. And why is fire used? Fire is used to clear land. But that's one technology that's used to clear land. Another technology that people can potentially use to clear land is to clear cuts. That doesn't involve wood. So we have this two forms of it. And why is land being cleared in Amazon? It's being cleared for agriculture. Usually first, burn or grazing to the forest areas are used to raise cattle, and then maybe later on that will be transformed into soy or other products. But before I tell you guys a very sad story about wildfires in Amazon, I want to show you this picture, which should bring us a lot of hope about what environmental law, what environmental law and enforcement will do. Here is an access of deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon since the 1988 all the way to 2024. And we see this very sharp reduction in deforestation post 2004. And why did that happen? Because Brazil implemented a very bold and broad plan called the Action Plan for Prevention of Deforestation in Amazon. That plan comprehended multiple policies that have been pushed by environmentalists, indigenous activists, and NGOs, researchers, that included creation of protected areas, demarcation of indigenous territories, among other policies, but also give a light in the use of the law. So, starting in 2006, Brazil started using this system called the third satellite monitor, which issued near real-time deforestation alerts. And those alerts were then used to trigger on-the-ground enforcement. Here's the picture of IBAMA, Brazil's agency that does this kind of on-the-ground enforcement. Here, they were directed to a location where deforestation is effective. They are working on getting rid of the equipment. Here, they're burning the equipment. That's one of the tools they have to prevent that deforestation occurs even further. And they issue fines. However, one important caveat of this satellite monitoring is that until 2016, it could only detect one form of deforestation, which was clear cut. So the satellite could capture this form of deforestation really well and trigger that on-the-ground enforcement and take the agents there to stop deforestation. However, it did a poor job detecting degradation that looks more like this from pilots. So, as I showed you guys before, that policy that was implemented led to a very impressive reduction in deforestation. However, I started my talk by showing you all the fires that I saw in the Amazon. When we see what happened with the burn area after 2004, it's way less clear of what happened. And of course, we have climatic events here that can explain a lot about the extension of the fire damage and how much a forest was being burned. However, I wonder, is there some human response here, that a human component that can explain the persistence of fire despite better and stronger environmental policies? So my research question broadly is was there a change in human activity in response to this new environmental law enforcement? So I wonder if once we started targeting really well one type of deforestation, which involved clear cutting, was there a shift towards a less detectable form of deforestation with the use of fire? And I didn't come up with this hypothesis. This hypothesis was brought up by Ibama's president, the Environment Agency in Brazil, commenting on the high frequency of fires in the last year. So he was saying, people are betting on this idea, taking advantage of the fact that it's dry and hot, and the forest no longer has the same humidity as it used to. It's a window of opportunity. Since I can no longer the forest, I'll set up fire. So he points of this strategic shift by farmers and agents in Amazon from deforestation, clear-cutting deforestation, to the use of fire, which is less effective and harder to punish, I must say. But it's really complicated to establish a causal link between environmental law enforcement, this change in enforcement, and the use of fire. Because on one hand, you can imagine that just having the presence of the Environment Agency might reduce people's willingness to start fires. So in locations where more enforcement, we might see less fires. But at the same time, we might think that places with more fires are gonna be the ones where environmental law enforcement will be targeting, right? So it's really hard to disentangle these two things and have a causal link between the two. And then for this reason, my research will use an instrumental variable approach, where I was trying to find a source of exogenous variations in enforcement. And the source that I'm going to use is cloud cover. So in the first stage, I'm going to find exogenous variation in environmental enforcement caused by cloud cover, exactly because the main tool that triggers environmental enforcement in this context is the satellite one. And then after I find the exogenous variation in environmental law enforcement that is caused by cloud cover, I can use that to check the effect of its enforcement on people's behavior and forest fires. So just to give you guys a visualization of why my instrument works. For example, here, imagine this red square. There was an area that had been recently deforested. The satellite will pick that up, trigger on-the-ground enforcement. The agents will be there, issue fines. However, if that same plot is covered by clouds, that whole chain wouldn't happen, and enforcement wouldn't be present. So just to give you guys some preliminary results, in my third stage, I do find the relationship cloud cover and environmental enforcement, and I measure environmental enforcement by the number of fines. So on average, municipalities that had higher cloud coverage within a month or a year had less environmental fines. And then in my second stage, I find that localities that were more exposed to environmental enforcement due to the variation in cloud coverage had higher forest fires the following year. So that indicates to me that there is this learning process of avoiding enforcement, since enforcement targets really well one kind of deforestation. So I hope that with my research, I can contribute to our understanding of what drives the human decision to use fire. And I think we should really care about the fact that we're using fire as a deforestation technology for many reasons. Here I'm bringing two of them, of course, because there's health implications from that smokiness that I felt in Brazil when I was there. That's really unpleasant. That has terrible health consequences, but also because people care about maybe possibility of the Amazon regenerating and promoting restoration, if it's being burned out, that can have very important implications in the forest recovery. And I hope that with my research, I can give insights about new incentives and new policies that we can implement to prevent the use of fire. And I would like to thank a lot of people that have helped me with this research, but especially my advisor, Robert.
Who wants to heat up the conversation?
I was wondering if you have conducted any actor mapping, like regarding who is kind of behind this fires, because just considering like that it's probably not people that do it for like subsidy or like their livelihood.
Yes, that's something eight property boundary bill. So I will have a great idea of the size of the property and then we can big small holder, large landholder, and also we have great information about land use. So I think knowing what happens after a fire takes place, the great indication of what is actually driving. And but if I have to bet, I would bet probably large.
I can try. On other farmers once were to take place. In other words, how effective is the enforcement discouraging deforestation all around the whole earth? By word or not,
Yeah.
One to say strongly, but
Yeah, absolutely don't. Yeah, I really want to have turns since I can observe like where the fine was issued, which property owner, and then the neighbors. And it was this whole farmers talking that got to this research question, because I don't know if you guys remember, there was a huge 2019 wildfires in the Amazon that became world news. And there's no proof of that, but there's a lot of discussion about farmers supporting, since it was so clustered geographically and how farmers were using WhatsApp coordinate to start fires. Exactly that when they exhaust the agent's capacity to issue fines and do research and find people. Yeah. Sounds like no, it's not. I didn't present today, but that's something I will work.
Hi, Anna. Great presentation. Always excited to see what you're doing. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts. How you think forest fires and environmental law enforcement might be influenced by distinct political administrations? And that could be both on state level and on a federal level. Yeah, I just would love to hear your thoughts about it.
Saw the uh, sources matter to the extent to the presence of environmental report during Bolsonaro's administration, the law would change. Those get less resources for the agency that should be monitored, right? So that is fundamental. And also something I have a look at is how local politics involved in that, because no local politicians are really involved with agribusiness in Brazil, but they have this big confrontation with Obama and environment. So that's something that we look at how we're more or less aligned with the agribusiness sector, how we will act as a mayor.